Hello everyone, my name is Kayla. Welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be doing a review of A Song for the Wild built by Becky Chambers. So this is quite the book to go over, so it's going to take a little bit of stuff to think. I'm going to cut that out. Okay. So essentially we are following two characters. One is a non-binary character named Sibling Dex, and they're trying to figure out their life. It's difficult for them. They've been doing a lot of different things to try to figure out their life. They went to school, they went to a monastery to be a monk, and just not figuring out what they're doing. And eventually they meet up with this other character who is a robot who also doesn't have a gender. And their name is Moscat. Essentially, when a robot finds something, the first thing they wake up to, that when they first get their consciousness, and they see whatever thing it is, that is their name. And I found that really interesting. So essentially, Dex first comes out as a monk traveling to be a tea monk. And tea monks are essentially these monks that talk to people as they make them tea and help them figure out their problems and make them feel better. Just listening to them, essentially. And actually it's really nice. And then we find out that Dex is very tired of the city, kind of feeling some wanderlust, wanting more of their life than being a tea monk. And as I said, eventually meets up with Moscap, and Moscap wants to know more about humanity. So they want Dex as a guide, and in turn, Moscap will help guide Dex through the wild, because Dex wants to go to this monastery that's in the wild, in the wild, where the robots are. Which is another interesting concept, because as soon as robots gained consciousness, they immediately went into the wild. They stopped dealing with humanity anymore, and humanity let them go. Didn't think anything of it. Just okay, that's cool, you gained consciousness, and we're not gonna bother you. Do your thing. And there's a lot of interesting things talking about humanity, and there's this quote, "Its only legacy was to persist where it did not belong." So this is definitely talking about the environmental impact that humanity has on nature, and everything going on around that, buildings, especially metal buildings that don't deteriorate the same way as something made out of wood, right? And then it's talking about this these memories that robots have. They kind of have something called remnants. So remnants are like memories, but they're only feelings and pictures. So I guess they're more in the primitive part of your brain. Then we can move on to some themes here. So we have humanity, feeling lost, platonic relationship, gender nonconformity, finding meaning in life, purpose, and autonomy. So the ones I really want to discuss is gender nonconforming. So I found this very interesting in this book, is that there's two characters that are gender nonconforming, and they're at the center of the story. It's not just characters that are put off to the side and never mentioned again. It's the two main characters that just don't conform to gender. And I thought that was a really cool thing for the author to do. And then we have autonomy. So autonomy is a very interesting thing in this book, because we have the robots that went away to the wild, and they don't really want to interact with humans anymore, and the humans respected that. And that just seems so out of character for me, because I definitely have a less optimistic view of humanity than I guess Becky Chambers does, because I would think humanity would be oh, the robots are going away, these tools that we need, how dare they, we're going to get them back right now, and we're going to enslave them. But it's when the idea of consciousness came into the robots, they had to let them go, because they were kind of like people. And there was actually a couple laws passed to protect the autonomy of the robots, which was also very interesting. So a couple things I loved was definitely the gender representation. I also like that it was more philosophical than theological. So I'm not very well versed in theological theory, but philosophical, I have a basic understanding of it, and it was just nice to read it in the sense that it was about ideas rather than opinions and thoughts. So I thought that was kind of cool. What I kind of didn't love about this was I felt like it was very idealistic. When I was saying I have a less optimistic view of humanity, I just don't think it's all that realistic in that way. And then I have some quotes I wanted to go into before I go into my overall thoughts in the rating. So, there was on the very first page, the very first line, it was like immediately I was like hooked. If you ask 6 different monks the question of which godly domain robot consciousness belongs to, you'll get 7 different answers. So this is kind of tongue-in-cheek type thing, because obviously it's saying that there's 6 different monks, but there's 7 different answers. So it'd be interesting to see. And in the first chapter, it does definitely go into what different schools of thought would think about robot consciousness. And it was all like this little debate in there, and it was really fun to read. I don't even know what I think of robot consciousness, to be honest. I think it's kind of an interesting thought experiment. Like, what would you do if something gained consciousness that didn't have consciousness before, and didn't think to give it any autonomy? Like, obviously we give some autonomy to our pets, for example, like our cats, our dogs, birds, whatever, right? But when it comes to something that doesn't even have any consciousness at all, and it just gains consciousness one day, and it's not really like alive, it's kind of distinct, I think. It's a very interesting thought to think, well, it's not alive, so does it really need autonomy and like, do the consciousness matter if it's not alive? I don't know. It's a whole thing, probably better thought out for philosophers than me. And then the second quote, and this is from Moscap to Dex. You're an animal, and animals have no purpose. Nothing has a purpose. The world simply is. And this was meant to be comforting to Dex, because Dex was freaking out and just like not thinking clearly, and they were wondering what their purpose was in life and trying to find that, like, so hard that they were almost hurting themselves when they were going through the wild. And Moscap was like, you don't need to do that. You're allowed to just exist. Existing is okay. Existing is enough. And like, I feel like that was comforting, but also Dex was like, yeah, whatever. And it was an interesting thought to think there is nothing more than what there is. There just is. That's all. And that's a complete sentence right there. So yeah, that was a cool quote too. I really liked that one. And it definitely fit into the story very well. So my overall thoughts, I did think it was very idealistic. And it could have been a little more constructive about what reality would have been. An interesting way that humans respected robot autonomy, which I just talked about a couple minutes ago. And the overall rating, I gave a 5 out of 5 stars, because I think this is something that will stick with me and something that I can definitely think about and discuss with people, because it's definitely a good thought experiment at the very least. Let me know down below. Have you read A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers? Definitely a good book. I would recommend it if it's something that you want to get into. And if you have read it, let me know like your favorite quote. Let me know some of the themes you liked. Let me know what you think about robot consciousness. Like, even if you haven't read about it, what do you think about something that isn't alive and something that will never be alive to have consciousness, and what that autonomy means around that thing? Okay, so I think that's everything. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.